Hey y'all, I know I have been doing so many videos today, but this is the last one and it's not that long. This goes along with your narrative assignment, and so now that we know what the assignment is, I want to start talking about kind of what goes into a narrative. And so what I said was characteristics of narrative, more than just storytelling, and that more is the reflection. So I want to talk for a little bit about what this is going to look like. Okay, so here are the 8 characteristics of narrative, and we're going to go through each and every one of these, so I'm going to let you look at these, and I'm going to go through them in just 1 second. So, a narrative makes a point. So this is where your thesis comes in, and honestly, this is your thesis. What is the event, and how did it change you? So think about that. Falling down a well made me realize that I should watch where I'm going in my life. Something dumb like that, but that's your thesis sentence. And that's going to go at the end of your introduction. So keep that in your mind. I just did something for you, your whole paper pretty much. Okay? We'll convey action in detail. And so what I did here was, I want you to think about word choice when you do that. So I put 3 sentences. The lady walked home. All right, it's fine. It's boring. I don't care. But we could say something even more. The lady meandered to her house. And now we get this kind of implication that she's just getting there when she gets there. Then we said my sister darted home, and so now there's the implication of both speed, and we know who the lady is. So these are just little things to think about that don't change like length or make your paper like super boring or anything, but they add to it. So that's what I'm talking about when I say action, detail especially here. And kind of going on with that, it'll contain description. And so I want you to use interesting details, but don't focus so much on description that you overdo it. And don't describe everything. If you describe a whole room full of things, then your reader is going to go somewhere else. So think about what is really important and think about what you can describe beautifully. Think about that as well. And so, like I said, don't overdo it. Now this is called basically a plot graph, and we study this in literature. And so what we have here is we have our exposition, our rising action, so that's where you're actually creating that tension, your climax, and which is the top. This is where the important thing in your life happens. And then from here on out is your falling action, and I don't know if you can see this, but your denouement. That's how they say it is French. But that's basically your conclusion or the ending here. Okay? And so I want you to kind of think about this in your head. Here, I'm thinking this is where you start to explain yourself. This is introduction. So then, whenever you're telling the story kind of leading up to the thing that happened in your life, that's the rising action. That's where you're starting to create the picture. And obviously, the thing that happened. And then the falling action and the denouement, I would say are really, that to me is the place where you can reflect. That's how I would do it. I'm not saying that's the only way it can be done. I'm just saying that's probably how I would set it up if it were my paper. Okay? And, narrative sequence events, basically that means you tell it from the beginning, the next thing, the next thing. So your essay will probably be in chronological order. I've had people who work with flashbacks, but if you're going to do something like that, make sure that you don't go confusing, because really it can get confusing really fast. Chronological order. It uses dialogue. I know it's like a picture of a picture, and it's like me sitting at the same spot. But anyway, so a good narrative will use dialogue, but it won't overuse dialogue. And I talked about this a little bit more, but I put a little thought bubble by my head. Remember, use it sparingly. Too much can make your paper boring and even harder to read. Think about how sometimes, especially, I think about Hemingway, whenever he never tells me who's talking. And so I'm here, like, trying to figure out who's talking. And, it's confusing and maybe a little bit boring. I don't know. I mean, he was kind of a master at dialogue. Anyway, I digress. Moving on. Okay, now this one is actually kind of important, and this is where a lot of my students mess up. It's told from a particular point of view. Your narrative is going to be told in first person. And that means, I'm going to go down here, you're going to say I, me, my. So that's what you're going to be doing in this narrative. You're talking about yourself. The next thing that I say here, never use second person pronouns. And second person pronouns are you, your, yours, yous, y'all. So I want you to kind of think about that. You might notice that you see it in your paper. Get rid of it. And it's sometimes hard because we say you when we mean I. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to stand wholeheartedly, or we want somebody to understand what we're saying, and we don't want to take a wholehearted stance on what we're saying. Okay? And then I went ahead and put third person as well. Third person pronouns are he, she, they, hers, his, theirs. You write your other two papers in third person and this paper in first person. Second person is a dirtbag and you'll never use it. Okay, and then make sure your story is told in past tense. And you might say, well, duh, Hunter. But you will not believe the number of times that people, they switch and they say, you know, I was watching TV and then this guy comes up. Well, so what you've done there is you were watching TV past and this guy comes up. That now turns into present tense. So if you say he came up, then you got it in past tense. So kind of keep that in your mind. It happens all the time. And I will definitely tell you to fix it. Okay? Reflects on events fairly. This is where you really look at what happened. And I mean, sometimes it's not that fun to look at what happened. And look at it honestly. Okay? One thing about reflection in this paper in general, you may want to think about what you're going to talk about. If it is something that is so painful for you to bring up, I would say it might not be the topic for you. And number one, if you can't get a C on a paper because you're like, oh my God, she's talking about my grandma dying and she gave me a C on it. It's not because I don't like you or like your grandma. It's just that the paper needed some work, okay? So I hope you don't take it personally, and I think you really need to think about, can I discuss this? And I have had a lot of things that students have tried to write about that they just did not. They just weren't emotionally ready to write about. And so keep that in your mind. Okay, and then the last thing, so keep these points in mind, and this is a lot of, it comes along a lot with description, but so your reader wasn't present, so they can't observe or participate, so it's up to you to make them observers and participators in the story. They don't know everything that you do. You've got to fill them in. They don't necessarily share your opinions or values. Now, keep that in mind right now. I mean, we just live in such a politically charged climate right now that you really need to think about who your readers are. And usually I try as hard as I can to keep politics out of this kind of realm, I suppose. So kind of keep that in your mind. And then your reader may not respond in the same way. And I had a paper one time that a student, I don't even know why he wrote this, but it was like about like killing his dog. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like crazy town. And I don't know about you, but I do not want to read something about somebody murdering a dog. So keep that in your mind, that if you're about to tell me a story about a dog murder, don't do that. I really love puppies. Okay, so, and if you have any questions about topic choice, please, please, please don't hesitate to let me know. All right, y'all. Well, that's it. Y'all have a lovely weekend.